Regular meeting of the Cook County Board of Commissioners to order on this Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. Please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next I'll read a statement regarding our virtual meetings. It has been determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related peacetime emergency declaration made by Governor Walz in accordance with Minnesota Statutes Chapter 12. Number 2, we have ensured that all members of the body participating in the meeting, wherever their physical location, can hear one another, can hear all discussion and testimony offered at today's meeting. Number 3, we have also ensured that members of the public present at the regular meeting location of the body can hear all discussion, testimony, and all votes of the members of the body. We have urged the public not to attend this meeting in person because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've ensured that members of the public can view and monitor the meeting remotely in real time by broadcasting the meeting on the Cook County website. Number 4, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have determined that it may be unfeasible for County Auditor Brady Powers, County Attorney Molly Hicken, County Administrator James Yorkie, and members of the Board of Commissioners to be physically present at the County Boardroom at the Cook County Courthouse. Number 5, all votes will be conducted by roll call, so each member's vote on each issue will be identified and recorded. And that brings us to any adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing or seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support?
Starley, support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Motion and support. The roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Swalson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval of the agenda. That brings us down to a public comment period. Do we have any public comments? Yes, Linda.
Hi there. I'm Linda Newman. I just wanted to introduce myself and say that I am on, let's see, line item number 9. And I'm just here in case anybody has any questions about that. So I thought I would introduce myself now and then just kind of sign off or mute and then come back around the time I think I'm up.
That sounds great. Thank you. Administrator Yorkie, have you received any public comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have not.
Thank you. And I don't see any commissioners flagging me down, so I'm assuming there's none received on that end as well. So we'll move on to discuss the consent agenda. Are there any items in the consent agenda that a commissioner would like to pull? Administrator Yorkie.
My apologies. I intended to pull the Trimble controller item from the agenda, and that didn't get done. So I would request that we put that under highway if we could.
So that is item 3G, the Trimble controller's purchase, and we'll move that down to 8D. Any other items that commissioners would like to pull? Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I would like to pull the emergency management grant. I just would like some more clarification from Brady, I think.
And that would be item 3I, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we can move that down to item 12A under the auditor. Any other items? I see no more. I hear no more. So I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Commissioner Hawkins?
I will make the motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins.
And Swallowson seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Swallowson. Do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallowson?
Aye.
Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. Motion passes with unanimous approval. That brings us, whoops, there we go, to item 4, a COVID-19 update. And Grace is with us this morning. Good morning, Grace. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, commissioners, for having me back. Update this week. Since our last board meeting together, we've had 8 new cases come in. Our case count now stands at 163. So it's holding steady in that we're getting a case every day or two. I guess an average of every other day, we seem to get a new case in, and it kind of comes in spurts. So some days we'll get maybe 2 cases and then we'll have nothing. And that's just kind of how it's been going here for the past 2 weeks. In terms of our local vaccination rate, we have 63.3% of county residents who are fully vaccinated at this time, which means that they've received either the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or the 2 doses of either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. What I've heard from the State Department of Health is that the goal is to have 70 to 80% of people vaccinated. And that's not just in each county, but that's statewide and countrywide to get to that community immunity, or what's sometimes called herd immunity, which is enough people who are immune to the virus so that it can't spread as quickly through the population. And at that point, there'd be much less risk of overwhelm to the healthcare system, and there'd be some indirect protection for people who are not vaccinated or who have compromised immune systems. So we're not quite there, but we're certainly on our way. We're doing really well, and we're keeping up the momentum. We have, we're still vaccinating, even though the volume has gone down. We have our pop-ups throughout the county going throughout the remainder of the month and into early June. And we also have events still happening at the community center. So this week we have a full clinic tomorrow in Lutzen. That's 30 people. We have a second dose clinic this week at the community center as well. And then we have registration open for a Sunday afternoon event in Grand Marais, and that is on the 23rd, as well as an evening event in Schroeder and 2 daytime events along the Gunflint Trail and Mid Trail and End of Trail. So everything is open so that people can plan ahead if they need help getting transportation, if they have questions. We're open to helping people access appointments and letting them, getting them the best public health information we have to share. So I would just urge community members to reach out to us if they're struggling to access an appointment, or if they have any questions that we can help them answer. So we're also planning a Pfizer event with North Shore Health in the first week of June. And the date is still tentative because we're watching very closely what will happen with the recommendation to lower the age of Pfizer down to 12. So the FDA granted emergency use authorization for Pfizer down to the age of 12. But there's a few steps that still have to happen before we can actually go ahead and start vaccinating that age group. So the CDC has a Council on Immunization, the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, and they're going to meet later this week. And then they make a formal recommendation to, they would make a formal recommendation to follow the FDA and lower the age down to 12. And at that point, the state health department has to follow suit. And then at that point, we locally can start vaccinating. So we're not quite there, but it's the wheels are turning. And we're anticipating that by the first week of June, we'll be able to offer a Pfizer event for people 12 and up. And in anticipation of that, my staff and I are going into the middle school, high school classrooms to teach a basic lesson on how the COVID-19 vaccines work. And we're looking to set up a parent meeting via Zoom so that parents can also hear a short presentation on how the vaccines work and ask us questions as well. And so that I think that outreach and education will be helpful because people have questions, even if they themselves have been vaccinated. When it comes to their kids, I'm sure they have additional questions. We want to give people the opportunity to ask those questions and to learn more about the vaccines. So that's where we're at with Pfizer and dropping the age down to 12. We are also following the news at the state level this past week that Governor Walz announced he started to incrementally roll back some of the pandemic restrictions last week. So the masking outdoors is no longer required in most circumstances, with the exception of a crowded outdoor event. He's also started incrementally rolling back some of the capacity limits for businesses and other organizations, which will continue at the end of May. And then he set the benchmark that after 70% of Minnesotans are vaccinated, or July 1st, whichever comes first, that he will end the statewide mask mandate. So it's exciting news. We also got a lot of questions about that news here in the public health department. So particularly working with businesses. So our work with the local business community continues. It's something that's really important, I think, especially as the guidance has changed so much. It's hard to keep on top of. And so we anticipate that as the summer draws nearer and nearer, we will continue to get requests for support. And we're always happy to take those and to reach out and work with business owners who have questions about how to update their preparedness plan for the summer. It will no longer be a requirement, but I would recommend that business owners still continue to think through what feels safe for them and their staff in the summer, even after the mask mandate is lifted at some point. And so I really see that as our role, is to kind of be that intermediary and trying to translate what the changes in the CDC guidance might mean locally and how our local community members can try to operationalize those in their businesses. So I anticipate more questions as the restrictions continue to lift. And then finally, aside from vaccination and kind of the technical assistance piece with our businesses, we've really focused on communications. So the postcard did go out, I would say just a week and a half ago now. It went out to all the mailing addresses in the county, telling people how to sign up for vaccine appointments. And it looked really nice. We had some extra copies that went to both North Shore Health and Sawtooth Mountain Clinic for their waiting rooms in case there are patients coming who did not receive those. I'm thinking particularly of some of our seasonal residents who maybe don't have a mailing address here or weren't here to receive that. That might be a way to reach that group. We also started a Q&A section, which is a collaboration between the clinic and public health to answer a question about the COVID vaccine or a COVID-related question every week for a month or two here. And so Dr. Farshman from Sawtooth Mountain Clinic kicked that off last week. And then I've continued to work with Nick, the PIO shared position with North Shore Health on a Voices of Vaccination and Public Health campaign, where we're talking to different community members about their experience through the pandemic and what motivates them to follow public health guidance and what has motivated them to receive the vaccine. And that's been a great project. Nick has some great raw content that he is working to turn into a piece that will go in the News Herald, as well as on social media. And with that Q&A, I failed to say it's not just in the News Herald, it's on Boreal and in the News Herald. So it's accessible both ways to folks in the community. So we're still busy, but we're making a lot of great progress with vaccination. And I think that outreach communications work is really kind of the newest challenge and task at hand for us. So we're just continuing on and looking forward to some exciting things on the horizon with the Pfizer announcement and with the goal to get to 70% vaccinated statewide. I think that those are good things to look forward to. I'm happy to take any questions from the commissioners.
Thank you, Grace. Any commissioners have questions?
Yes, Chairman Mills.
Yeah, Commissioner Starley.
Good morning, Grace. You mentioned that the Schroeder Town Hall would be a vaccination site. Is that in June sometime?
Let me see if I have the exact date here. It's in May. It's
In May.
I believe it is the 26th. Let me quick check here.
Okay.
Yep, it is the 26th of May.
Okay.
And that is from 3 to 6 p.m. And that'll be using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Okay. The township meeting is tonight, so I'll be sure to bring it up just to remind people too.
Oh, great. Thank you, Commissioner Starley.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Any other questions from commissioners? I see none and hear none. So we can let you go, Grace. Thank you very much for your hard work and really getting more and more excited as things move along here. And really appreciate the education piece, especially at this point in time, and just having those satellite clinics or events rather. Really proactive and good planning. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, commissioners.
And I do see Mike Keyport is on the call too. Mike, did you have an update you'd like to share? I know there's other items on the agenda pertaining to you, but I think we should give you an opportunity here. Good morning.
Good morning to you all. I really don't. I think we're kind of following suit with other counties in the region and throughout the state as they are gradually opening their county buildings. I was reviewing what was sent out yesterday, and I think we're doing a great job as we gradually open things up. So I think we're in a good spot.
Thank you. Does anyone have, as long as we have Mike here, does anyone have any questions for Mike? I don't see any there. I don't hear any. Thank you, Mike. And that brings us right to you. The firewise program coordinator service agreement.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, community members. I'm pleased to announce that we have selected Elsa Lundy as our next firewise coordinator. As you can see in the summary, I'm requesting the contract be approved by the board. And I will add to that, I apologize, I did not get it to our county attorney in time, so I would ask that you approve this contract with pending county attorney review of it. It seems a little confusing in there, but Todd Armbruster has been our firewise coordinator for quite a number of years. He has truly brought our program to a very high level. And in order to accommodate training of our new coordinator, I'm asking that we extend his contract for about a month so we can appropriately compensate him for training in our new person. There's a lot to learn, and it'll also be a kind of a learning curve for myself because with the pandemic, I didn't have a lot of time to spend on that learning the firewise program myself. So it'll be great for me also. It's really good timing. The contractors that we use up in Forest Service land and other places are getting cranked up now with the road restrictions being lifted. So it's a good time for Elsa to get started. As you can see in the summary too, this isn't a county position, it's a contracted position, and the funding comes from federal and state grants as well as Title III funding from Secure Rural Schools. I thank you for your consideration and stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Keyport. Any questions from commissioners? I see none and I hear none. Oh, Commissioner Hawkins.
Sorry, I'm just wondering about extending Todd's contract. I assume that cost is still covered by the funds from Firewise. Is that correct?
That is correct. And to clarify one other thing, that typically in the past with Todd, we've done a 2-year contract. So what Elsa will be doing here is ending the end of Todd's 2-year contract, which will end at year's end this year. And then you'll be seeing me again for renew and reviewing that contract again. So we're just kind of picking up where Todd left off there. And but yes, there is adequate funding for that training. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Thank you, Mr. Keyport. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Sullivan.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to approve the Firewise Coordinator Service Agreement pending a review by Attorney Hicken.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner Saulson.
And I second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Saulson. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Saulson.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Mr. Keyport.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 6, human resources. Ms. Dixon, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, commissioners. I am here to request that the board approve setting a special meeting for the purpose of discussing the Community Center Extension Director recruitment. Ms. Lori Visich from the U of M Extension would like to talk to the board regarding this on May 17th, 2021. So I would like to request that the board approve setting a special meeting of the board for May 17th, 2021 at 10 a.m.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Do any commissioners have questions or comments about this? Mr. Yoki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to explain a little bit about what we're doing here. So we have been getting a lot of emails and calls from folks in the community expressing concern about the impending retirement of Diane Booth, which will occur in August. And in response to that, we realize that there's a lot that we need to hear from folks in the community to make sure that we're going about this recruitment in a way that really ensures that we're able to serve community needs. And so because of that, we decided to schedule these listening sessions with various stakeholder groups that will take place this Friday and Monday next week. And it's really to get the feedback from this board, from the U of M Extension Board, from the Community Center Board of Trustees, and from the public, just to hear about what they would like to see in terms of prioritization of work objectives. As you all know, Diane wears many, many different hats, and there are many folks in the community who really have come to rely on the programs that she manages. And so we want to respect the community's desire to make sure that those services continue. And so that's what these listening sessions are about.
Thank you, Mr. Yoki. Any questions from commissioners? I would entertain a motion to set the special meeting. Commissioner Smolson.
Yeah, I would move that we approve the special meeting to discuss the recruitment process.
Thank you, Commissioner Smolson. Is there support?
Starley support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, do a roll call vote. Commissioner Smolson.
Aye.
Commissioner Starley.
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
That moves us down to item 7, SWCD. Let's see. Yes, good morning, Ms. Hansel.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. I am requesting, I'm going to back up here. So I am requesting to have the board enter into a resolution with the partners that we work with for the One Watershed One plan. So as you may be aware or may not be aware, each county has a water plan, and county has 2 water plans. We have the county water plan that covers the north part of the county. It used to cover the entire county, but the state transitioned into what's called One Watershed One plan. So a larger, more broader way to manage water resources and land resources to better benefit at a watershed scale instead of dividing everything at a political boundary. So in 2014, Cook County went into this process, and we developed the Lake Superior North One Watershed One plan. And that's been going really well. We've got implementation dollars now coming in. We're getting ready for a 3rd cycle of implementation dollars. And it was a process that we partner with Lake County, Lake SWCD, Cook SWCD, and then Cook County. So the 4 entities developed that plan. Well, now it's time to transition the Rainy River headwaters. So the end of the county, which is operating currently under just that small local plan, into this One Watershed One plan. And eventually all the areas in the state will be going to this. So there's funding available now to apply for. And so it'll be, the partners in this plan will be Cook County, Cook SWCD, Lake County, Lake SWCD, North St. Louis SWCD, and St. Louis County. And that's the proposed group. The map that was in the packet shows a little bit of it goes up into Koochiching, but they will not be participating because it's only 10% or less of their area that's part of the watershed. So it doesn't really apply to them to be part of the process. So the resolution is there to say that we can enter into applying for the funds for the grant to be able to apply for this. It's a little over a 2-year grant, cover all the costs of the planning process for staffing needs, and to hire a consultant to help with writing the plan and doing some modeling and analysis that's necessary. North St. Louis SWCD will be the fiscal agent. They also house the county water planner. I'm our county water planner. And then Lake SWCD, their county water planner is within the SWCD. So it doesn't cost the county any funding other than we have a commissioner that will attend the meetings as part of that policy committee. They help to govern the plan and make sure that things are in it and answer any questions. So they're part of that policy committee is a commissioner from each of the participating counties, and then a supervisor from each of the participating conservation districts. So they all make up this policy committee, and again, they help facilitate it and help keep that process moving. And Commissioner Sullivan's been part of some of the meetings that we've been having for planning for applying for this funding. Then you'll also see that there's an MOA. This often comes later on in the stage, but we're trying to, it's a very, very, very competitive process this year. So we're trying to get all our ducks in a row and say, everybody's really ready to start this process if the funding comes forward. We did this with the Lakes Pier North watershed planning process, and that helped to, I think helped, part of it was to get our foot in the door to get awarded that grant, because it was able to show that the partners are ready to work together. So I'm here before you, and I can bring up a map if you need it, but just to ask if the county, I'm not sure what information you need. I could talk for hours and hours. But if you're interested in moving forward with this resolution and this MOA to start this process, our grant application is due June 11th. So we're all getting together and trying to get all the ducks in the row and meet with everyone to answer questions and to move forward with applying for the grant. The grant total is around $200,000. That we'd be applying for, and there is no match required at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Hansel. Yeah, you answered my question just about Coochin County there, so thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to field other questions from commissioners.
May I add something, Chair?
Please.
Thank you. And I will say the boundary proposal that's in there with the resolution is different, or we're requesting a change of boundaries because originally the boundaries have changed a few times with a lot of discussions, in that it was encompassing almost the whole Coochin area to cover all of that really broad watershed. And this is a huge watershed, but it was too big of an area, jurisdictions and too many concerns. And so it was then, after a lot of discussions, requested that we shrink it down to what it is now. So then there was a discussion of including the Vermilion River watershed, and then that got included in. So that's why the boundary language is changing, is to include that with resources that are very similar and with partners that are able to manage those resources together.
Okay, thank you. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Ms. Hansel. You answered a lot of my questions. I know nothing about this, so I appreciate your thoroughness in explaining it to me. So you mentioned a $200,000 grant. So how do you decide who gets that money? Is it this group then, this advisory committee that does this?
Yep. I'm sorry, just one second. Sorry, also homeschooling here. So yeah, so that's a great question. So within the RFP, which is a request for proposal from the Board of Water and Soil Resources, there are kind of specific guidelines. So we as a group will meet, so the water planners meet, and we've already discussed like who gets the funding, how do we do this? And the way that's broken up is the facilitators and those really leading the plan. So that's us as the county water planners, we get the budget. So we already discussed, we know that there's going to be around 34 meetings. We've decided, since I've already gone through the process, we'll be facilitating the meetings. So then we have to calculate hours and estimate. So we're breaking that up into, for us, Cook County, we have a little over 25%, but most of that's boundary water. So I'm not going to have as much funding coming in towards me as, say, Lake and North St. Louis SWCDs. And then we have the discussion of counties, and counties don't normally receive any funding for these because they're covered. You have taxes, you have all these other ways, and it's just part of the duty of having a county water plan. So there's no funding for that. And then we, with that, decide, okay, what do we need our consultant to do? And what is that actually going to cost? And so, because you can't undertake writing this plan as a district, it's already kind of like, I always call it the second job. It's my night job when we start this planning process. This is my third plan I've done, so I know what I'm getting into. And so that's how we break up the budget, is we look at that. And there's a lot of admin time. These grants require, if you remember when I spoke before, just as a district, what we have to track just for our time. So these grants require the same amount of tracking, except for the difference is now we've got to keep track of all of our partners. So we've got to keep track of what counties are doing. We're going to hopefully bring in the 1854 treaty, and Boys for It are involved in this possibly. So now we've got a whole nother group to keep track. Besides the policy committee, we'll have a large advisory committee. So there's so much admin time. And so a lot of it goes to personnel for the districts to help manage it. So that's how we've broken it down. And that's how the RFP guides you to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from commissioners? Only other comment I would make is, and I think I've spoken to this a little bit before, is I've had a little bit of Bowser or a little bit of some background at one of the AMC training sessions with Bowser and what the One Watershed One Plan kind of structure looks like, and I'm aware of the state's direction, and so I'm just really grateful and thankful, Ms. Hansel, that you're on it and getting ahead of it, and that's going to do wonders for us. So thank you very much. Well, I see no further questions, and I hear no further questions. I would entertain a motion here. Commissioner Sullivan.
I move to approve the resolution and to approve and enter into the memorandum of agreement.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support?
Starley, support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Starley?
Aye.
Commissioner Swalson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you very much, commissioners, and thank you very much, Ms. Hansel.
Thank you.
That brings us down to item 8, highway. Engineer Haas, good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. The first one I'm actually going to turn over to our maintenance supervisor, Josh Dix, who decided to join us and explain the first topic a little bit more than I can. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Engineer Haas. Good morning, Mr. Dix.
Good morning. This first item is to approve our contract for calcium chloride application. Typically, this is a pretty straightforward thing, something for consent, but there's a little bit of a change from last year that we're going to talk about. And I thought I'd kind of take that opportunity as well to just describe our program a little bit, what's going on with calcium chloride and gravel roads. So the first thing I want to start out with is why do we put calcium chloride on roads? Calcium chloride is a liquid. It's hygroscopic, and what that means is it pulls moisture out of the air, and it helps to bond that moisture into the roadbed and keep the fines, the clay and the sand that holds the larger rock together in the gravel road. It's keeping that all together. If we didn't have that, a lot of those fines with traffic and with weather get pushed out of the road in dust, as I'm sure you've seen on some roads, and that leaves behind just the large rock that is then able to move very easily. So really, that's kind of one of the biggest pros of putting down calcium chloride is it keeps those fines in the roadbed. I did find one report, kind of looking around in some public works magazines, that said that using calcium chloride can reduce the need for grading by as much as 50%, and it can reduce the need for re-graveling by as much as 80%. So kind of my first point is that it does benefit the road, and it benefits our ability to maintain the road. Sometimes it's kind of looked at as just a dust control, a dust suppressant to make people happy. But the more I've quickly kind of learned about it and talked to the crew a lot, it really is critical for the quality of the road. But it's also really critical for making people happy. It really does keep the dust down on roads, and we get a lot of calls asking about calcium chloride, and they're generally positive in that they want more. But I also want to mention that calcium chloride has some negative aspects as well. First of all, calcium chloride adds to chloride pollution. So just like road salt adds to chloride pollution in water, so does calcium chloride. And chloride pollution is very difficult to get out of water, and basically impractical to the point of being impossible. Also, something I didn't know, talking to soil and water, is the calcium part actually is a potential pollutant, which I wouldn't have thought of. They told me that there's certain, invasive mussels and mollusks and whatnot that can't grow a shell here to survive because there's not enough calcium in the water. And here we are adding it. So I'm very familiar with chloride pollution, but I would have never thought of that one on my own. Another concern with calcium chloride is that on its own, it's very corrosive to steel and vehicles, much more so than road salt. There are additives that can be mixed with calcium chloride to make it nearly non-corrosive or much less corrosive than road salt. Road salt is oftentimes in kind of deicers and chlorides. Road salt is kind of base level for corrosion. And then when they're trying to make materials more or less, rate them for more or less corrosion, they use road salt as a basis. So that's why I keep mentioning road salt. But they can add these organic additives that bring the corrosion way down, but they bring the price way up. So currently, our history and this year is for just straight calcium chloride. And really the last con is that it's expensive. Calcium chloride is one of our largest maintenance line items, really outside of staffing and our capital improvement. Calcium chloride is kind of the next highest thing up there. It's a real big chunk of money. Robbie and I did a little research kind of early on, just trying to learn about how other rural counties deal with calcium chloride. And it seems, just in what we found, is we're a bit of an outlier. We put a lot down and we pay a lot compared to some counties. A lot will maybe just treat in front of a certain home. If there's somebody that just wants that dust control in front of their home, some of them ask the residents to pay for that then, or they'll sell them dry calcium chloride that they can put down in front of their own house. I've noticed, driving the Kramer Road or Parent Lake, as soon as you get into Lake County, it doesn't appear that those roads are treated, and you will very quickly see the difference because it's a big item. I think it's mentioned in the attachment, our budget's $200,000. We came in under budget at 191 this year, but either way, we're talking about a pretty significant expense. Looking back in history a little bit, as I mentioned, calcium chloride is a very popular item. It gets a lot of attention from residents. Long before, well, not long before, but a bit before Robbie and I were here, my understanding is that calcium chloride in 2017 was 100% cut from the budget because it is oftentimes seen as a partially frivolous item, if you will. It's, when you're looking at money for bridges or money for dust control, boy, bridges need some money. So I wasn't here to understand exactly what happened there, but my understanding is that the backlash was significant from residents being very unhappy with that, and it was quickly put back into the budget the following year. So last year, looking back, we had $200,000 budgeted, and the winning bid came in at $218,000. And I looked at the board item for last year, and Kristen, the previous engineer, wrote that she thought this was an important enough item that even over budget, she would rather find money somewhere else to pay for it. And I think some of that money from somewhere else was my wage. That was being put into gravel and calcium chloride, is my understanding. So that money's not available for that anymore. And then when I started in August, the budget process was really well underway. Certainly coming up to speed, I wasn't going to feel like I had enough understanding of where things were going to change the budget process. So the budget number for this year was already set at $200,000 once again. So really, I just looked at, what was our cost per gallon last year? Thought maybe it'd go up modestly. I had no reason to expect a big increase, but last year we were at $1.09 per gallon applied by semis. It's slightly more for some of our back roads that are applied by a shorter truck, but we'll say 109 a gallon for the bulk of it. I thought maybe 114, 115. So really that meant we needed to reduce our total application by 1/8, so down to 175,000 gallons to make sure that we're staying under that budget number of $200,000. So that's what we put out for bid. This is one of the kind of larger, public advertised bid items. Thankfully, we got a new quote in this year. Our low bid is $1.09 per gallon like last year. So that was a pleasant surprise. But again, it's to stay under that number, we're doing a less quantity of gallons. So how are we going to do that is probably your next question. And really, it's a matter of, I asked the crew and I really pushed them. I'm like, what roads can we cut? What roads is this unnecessary on? And due to its popularity, they said none. Like, you could possibly cut calcium chloride on any roads. And so I pushed a little harder, and maybe there's, a handful that kind of come to mind that are either very lightly traveled or, shady, hold moisture better. But really, I think it's going to look more like a reduced application rate rather than cutting roads. So that's kind of what I'm going to push for. We have a staff member that's been doing this for a long time, and it's kind of, his item where he really takes ownership and does a good job of overseeing the contractor. And so really we're pushing to just kind of make it work. It's not a very specific, we are cutting this road or that road. It's more, we're just going to try and get the gallons down a little bit to make sure we stay within budget. Our specifications do have a plus or minus 30%. It's not possible to be exactly on when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of gallons. So when we put this out for bid, basically we say this is what we think is going to be the total gallons that will fit our budget number. But there is specs in there where we could, at our discretion, go over or under, and the contractor would still need to meet that price for that amount of gallons. So if we, for some reason, use less, which is unlikely, we could go as low as 30% less than 100,000 gallons, or we could go over, if for some reason they were able to do a lot more with a large truck, which is that cheaper rate, we could increase our gallons, up to 30% more. Again, making sure we stay within our budget number. The last thing, Robbie and I do have it in mind to try alternatives to calcium chloride. There are some other products out there. They're very expensive, much more than calcium chloride. And the ones we've been looking at so far also take a lot more roadbed preparation. So you need to grade the road immediately before the application. You need to put the liquid down. You need to regrade it, compact it. It's a much more involved process and more money. That doesn't mean we don't want to try it, but for this year, like so many things, I've come to the point where I just want to do it how it's been done for the most part, learn how it's been done before I can see what new directions we want to try. Rather than just turn things upside down when I don't have a full understanding yet. So really for this year, we're just doing what we've done, this straight calcium chloride, slightly less than last year to stay in budget. In the future, one thing that I do have in mind is at some point, I think the previous engineer or 2 or 3 ago, I'm not sure, did buy some 2,000 gallon tanks that fit in our tandem dump trucks. So we are kind of talking about maybe because some of our side roads that need that smaller truck come in at a higher price, that might be a place where we could try doing some in-house work and buy the liquid straight from the manufacturer and apply it ourselves and see if that would result in some cost savings and some flexibility too, and like when we treat the road rather than relying on a contractor. And then we could kind of have things a little simpler for the contractor too on our larger roads where we would just set a mileage, a rate, and they could just do it very quickly and easily, which would also potentially kind of reduce our price. So that's kind of where we're at for calcium chloride. Again, really, this is it's kind of a typical item that's done every year, just a little bit less this year to stay under budget. And we'll kind of see after this year what directions we want to go next year, whether it be trying some new things or increases or decreases to that budget number. And we'll see. So I'll do my best to answer any questions if you have any. Otherwise, we're hoping to approve our contract for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Dix. That was an excellent synopsis and summary. Any immediate questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chair?
Yep, Commissioner Storley.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Josh. Well, I remember the summer of 17. So dry, wouldn't you know? And that made such a huge difference. You know, people did have some reason to complain, and we put it back in the budget. So that's where you are now. So I'm glad that you're talking about various roads all getting something, because I'm thinking, you know, of Cascade Beach, of, well, what do we have? Over 300 miles of roads?
Yeah, about 2/3 of which are gravel. So almost
Yeah.
every road
Mhm.
gets something. You know, some real roads might just be some intersections, but almost every road gets something.
Yeah, that'll be great. So what is the timing? How important is the timing of doing this?
I believe our specifications say, I forget if it's the beginning or end of July. But that is kind of the challenge with contracting it, is you lose some of that flexibility because they're picking up contracts all over. So we have a deadline in the specs, but we don't have a time frame set with that contractor until until it's approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Any other questions from commissioners? I've got a couple questions, which maybe will spur others. But I'm really curious about and maybe we'll get in the weeds here a little bit, but just about the alternatives for corrosion and how that works. And maybe I don't need to know that, but where I'm going with that is just if those alternatives for corrosion also have less of an environmental impact. The feedback I've received is both about the lack of calcium chloride and the dust, as well as concerns about the chloride in the watershed. So I'm just curious if you know anything about that.
There's kind of two different routes to go with that. One, most of my knowledge of calcium chloride comes through liquid deicers rather than dust control, but it's very similar. I mean, it's basically the same product being used for a different reason. And what they do to make it non-corrosive is add an organic compound, typically from beet or corn. And I don't know the science, but that for some reason works with the chlorides to make them non-corrosive. I don't know if it kind of holds the ions together. I'm not even going to try and guess, but somebody very smart knows that when you add organics to chlorides, it makes them less corrosive. Organics have environmental impacts too. It really depends on the quantities that you're putting into the environment, but those, when those break down in water, they reduce organic dissolved oxygen, and so you can lead to algae blooms. And again, this would be in mass quantities or long periods of time, but even those additives have environmental impacts too. Really anything we do has a trade-off, I suppose. There's another new product that Envirotech is just trialing. Unfortunately, they weren't the low bid this year, but if we want to look at their adding some sort of polymer to calcium chloride to make it bond to the road better so that it doesn't dilute out as fast, and in theory would not get onto vehicles as much. It's somewhat more, this is its first year that it's ever been put out, but they still recommended that it get applied every year, which is what we're doing already. So that made me a little skeptical. It's like, if it's staying on the road better, why do I still need to put it down every year? And then I'm not really saving anything financially either. So I'm still curious about that product, but for this year, I wasn't sold on it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I'm really happy you're looking into all the options, and I am also happy to stay the course for this year, just to get that base of experience and just how things are done. So thank you. Did that trigger any other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, you made a comment that you have 200,000 gallon tanks that can fit in the back of a dump truck.
2,000.
I'm curious. Okay, and what do you currently use those for?
They're sitting in the grass. I think they were purchased. I don't know when they were purchased, of course, but I think the idea was either for calcium chloride or for putting water down on roads in front of graders. And I'm told they were insignificant in being able to wet the road enough for graders. So then they ended up just not being used. But I have experience building calibrated sprayers in my last job, so it wouldn't take a whole lot to put those tanks back into use. But at the moment, they're not being used for anything.
It would be nice to use what we have sitting around if we can.
I think so.
Yeah, I believe we got to see those when we did our facilities tours, sitting back in the graveyard there. Any other questions? I don't see any, and I don't hear any. I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the award of the 2021 chloride application contract to the bidder, which is Knife River North Central.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We have a motion. Is there support? Commissioner Swanson.
Swanson supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Swanson. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing or seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Starley.
Aye.
Commissioner Swanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you very much, Mr. Dix and Engineer Haas. That brings us to, oops, lost my spot. Item 8B, the hydro cedar purchase.
Yes. So this was kind of a fun one. This was something that Josh and I kind of had budgeted in our capital improvement plan. So kind of our long range plan here at the Highway Department, taking account of all the equipment that we have. And, I got, for once you kind of get some good news of, Auditor Powers had sent out an email to, a few of us, our departments, and said, hey, we have leftover money from these 2018 equipment bonds. Who needs something? And so, so that was kind of nice. And so immediately what came to mind for us was the hydro cedar. If for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's basically the thing that sprays that green mulch type stuff down after construction projects get done. Right now we just blow straw. That on the one side is very cheap and great. But it's great for how cheap it is, I guess. Overall, in the erosion control scheme of things, it is not great. And you can see that on projects where, the straw is put down. And so this purchase would really help us, really improve our erosion control and honestly too, help set, and kind of keep, ditch work that we do. It'll help maintain that a lot better and let the seeds, germinate and replant. So yeah, that's kind of where that comes from. So if there's any more complicated questions, I'll defer to Josh on that one, but money wise, I think I might be able to ask him. So I'll open it up for discussion, I guess.
Thank you, Engineer Haas. Yeah, and I have noticed just in some ditch works with the straw that doesn't do a whole lot. We start to get some rivulets and erosion, I guess, is the long and short of it. So this would, I think, do a lot for that. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Swalson?
Yeah, just I know the general price of straw. What is the general price for the applicant that you use in the new piece of equipment?
It's quite variable because there's different mulches you can use and there's different application rates. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. If you're in a real flat, decent soil, it's pretty inexpensive. As you get steeper slopes and poorer soils, then you use a better mulch, a thicker mulch, and a higher application rate. So then it does go up. In those instances, it would be more expensive than straw, but far more effective.
Okay, and have we factored that into our overall budget then for our application purposes?
At this point, our erosion control budget is the same. It's a place where we have a lot of improvement to make in our deeds and potentially in our funds in the future. But at this point, it's still the same.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent questions, Commissioner Smolson. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I know nothing about this stuff, so I Google. And I was kind of concerned that I'm on the Highway Advisory Committee, and I use that to really learn a lot from the other members there. And some of these things haven't been coming up in our advisory committee, where I think people have the expertise to know what I don't know. I kind of rely on them. So I'm concerned that it didn't go before them. So, but then I'm also noticed that the bid here, or the purchase agreement, is for $38,000, and it's from a North Dakota company. And I can find a 500-gallon one from Northern Tool for $11,000. So can you explain to me how you came up with this being the one that you need for $38,000?
Absolutely. So I'll answer some of the first parts, and I'll let Josh talk about equipment specific things. So this was kind of an oddball. You're totally right. Normally we go through committee stuff and like talk to people and say, hey, does this make sense? You know, this was something where these bonds expire this month. So we have to spend it this month, or it's kind of money on the table, if you will. And so this was something that we thought and I think this like just came up, honestly, like what, 2 weeks ago, Josh, I think. So this was a very quick, like, hey, make a decision on something now for, right around this dollar amount. And so that's where the expediency came in, and the lack of, talking it through in the committee side of things. I think we've mentioned erosion control stuff before, not specifically this. And so that's where this kind of came up from was that. And so this might have missed I can't remember when our last committee meeting was, but obviously it came up after that and clearly before our next one. So that's that part. Josh, do you want to go over equipment things?
Yeah, also this is a hydro cedar actually was in the equipment plan to be bought in 2020, but it was part of that equipment plan that wasn't funded. So this was something Dave and Russ had worked on already in the past and kind of had on the wish list. It got dropped. And then I was planning on putting it back on for next year with time for conversation, of course. And then all of a sudden we had this route of getting it sooner with very short notice. And so how we landed on this one? There's two main brands, maybe three, that are heavy duty, if you will. They have agitators, they have much stronger pumps. A lot of the cheap ones are jet agitated, so there's no augers, there's no way to break up that mulch. And unless you're using a very thin mulch, they plug immediately, and they will ruin your day when they plug, because you're basically unproductive for the rest of the day to try and make that machine work again. And I unfortunately know this because that's what I started out with using probably about a decade ago. We had a jet agitated one. They're much cheaper. They're completely insufficient for heavy mulches. They'll just plug up immediately. So we got quotes on new ones. Finn being one of probably the most common brand that you would see on any contractor's truck. Another one that I have experience with is Turf Maker. They were very competitive, almost the same price. We're ready to move forward on a new purchase. But because so many factories are slow this year, neither of them could get us something delivered by the end of the month. And that was the stipulation that we were given, was that it must be purchased by the end of this month or it can't be done at all. So the company that we're buying it from just happened to have a rental with 17 hours on it for sale on the lot that could be delivered in that time frame. But even any new ones from those companies on, kind of the government purchasing contract for that price, the soonest we could get one was two months out, and the one that was actually slightly cheaper of the new ones was looking at fall and a steel surcharge. So things were backed up. We were told we needed to make something either now or never. And so this one seemed to fit that bill and save us $1,000 for those 17 hours that it's been used. But I agree there are cheaper ones. But from my experience, they really, they can't do the heavier mulches. They just plug, and then you end up spending half a day taking the whole thing apart to try and get the plug out of the lines.
Thank
Did that answer your questions, Commissioner Hawkins? Cool.
Very good questions, Commissioner Hawkins. Thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for the answers too. Any other questions from commissioners? One thing I noticed just on the first page of the report attachments, it says price quote from Turfmaker Corp. That seems like that's inaccurate. I know that's kind of where you were looking before, so that's Swanston. Not that that matters.
No, that was, yeah, so sorry, that was a mistake. We had a last minute change. That the one we originally had in the packet, we couldn't get in time, so I had to do some last minute scrambling, and I missed that, so I apologize.
No big deal. I don't even know why I pointed that out, but I did. I think it was just because Mr. Dix brought up Turfmaker, and I said, wait a second, okay. Yeah, and I appreciate just the timeliness of this and trying to work with what we got, and I appreciate the technology of it, just the direction that we're going to try to improve the work that we're doing and the longer term maintenance too. So thank you. All right, well, last call for any questions, otherwise, or comments. Otherwise, entertain a motion here. Commissioner Sullivan.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to approve the hydro cedar purchase with the 2018 equipment bonds.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support?
Commissioner Swalson, support.
Thank you, Commissioner Swalson. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Swalson?
Aye.
Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, gentlemen, again. Brings us down to item 8C, the crossover timber bridge replacement.
Yes, so I think last time we had talked about accepting bids that were a bit higher than what we had expected. And so this is one where we said too high. But not even that. That's what, that's part of it. But what I really wanted to focus on with this one was really making sure other funding alternatives have been explored. And so, a few other options came across my desk that I felt prudent to explore before accepting this bid. Rejecting it. We're rejecting this one, but next year it very well could be this price. I'm not denying that that's what it could be. What I really want to make sure is that we are expending our TST funds in a responsible manner. And so there's a couple other funding options available. I've been working closely with our district state aid office and then the state aid bridge office downtown to explore these options. And so this particular bridge is a TST funded bridge, our transportation sales tax. And so what we might have available to us is some other alternative funding through the state. You can get variances from some committees. This is a county road, so technically we don't apply, or this doesn't qualify for state aid funds. But in rare circumstances, you can kind of make an argument to go after those funds. And so that's what we're doing. The state obviously wants to get bridges replaced. This project is ready to go. And so everybody is very on board with doing this project. And so I'm just exploring other options. Next summer, we're going to put it out for bid this fall. And so hopefully we get a little ahead of the curve too with contractors and projects and stuff for summer of 22, but for now, I think we're just going to go ahead and, as long as everyone here is on board with it, reject this bid, put it back out, in sometime in the fall, right around Thanksgiving or something like that. So I'll gladly answer any questions about this.
Thank you, Engineer Haas. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Good morning, Robbie. This is one in Schroeder Township.
What's that?
This is the bridge in Schroeder Township?
No, this is the one like way up the trail, County Road 46.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. This is that timber bridge. I think it's been in the works since 2010 or something like that. But yeah, this is close to those other 3 projects that we had put out earlier. So
because we have a cross river down here too.
Yeah.
I won't report to the township tonight then. But sometime we'll get you on their agenda too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley, for the clarification there. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right. I guess I had a question, Engineer Haas, just if you could elaborate a little bit on where the cost difference lies, if that's in materials or if they have that broken down for us to understand better.
Absolutely. And so similar to the other projects up the trail, it was in materials. Within the material cost is hauling. So an example might be, I'm just making up numbers now. This isn't what actually got bid, but say gravel, if we were in town, was $16 a yard or something like that. What we've been seeing on these projects that are, up these dead end roads very far is that turns into $80 or $90 a yard. It's substantially more, which that's why I'm trying to emphasize the point of not rejecting it because it's so much higher than what we thought. It very well could be that cost, and I'm not denying that. I just think it's worthwhile to explore these other alternatives, especially because we're utilizing our transportation sales tax fund. So the majority of it lies in the hauling, to be honest. That's what we're seeing.
Thank you. All right. Well, I don't have any further questions. If any other commissioners do, please speak up. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to reject the bid for the Cross River Timber Bridge replacement and to rebid it in the coming fall.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support?
Storley support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Smallson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval of rejection of the bid. Thank you very much, commissioners, and thank you, Engineer Haas. Mr. Yorkie.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know we still have one item under highway, but I see that Attorney Hicken has joined us and she's available for only a short time. So I'm wondering if we could go to her section of the agenda next.
Very good. And one item in particular, I suppose, correct? I'm assuming we're going to pass on the training. Yes, okay. And so thank you for jumping in here, Attorney Hicken. And I would gladly jump down to agenda item 11A.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I have in front of the board today is a proposed location agreement for a a film company that would like to film at the sheriff's office at the jail. There have been talks between the sheriff and this company called 37th Degree, which is run by a guy named Max Sellen, and who is based out of Duluth, I believe. So it was my advice that we not proceed with any kind of filming on location at the jail without an agreement in place. This is what I've proposed because we found out about this kind of late in the game, and the filming is scheduled for May 24th, which is before the next regular meeting. We're asking that the board approve this agreement in its basic outline form that you have here, but allow it to be finalized after your meeting, so long as those changes are approved by county attorney and county administrator. The actual motion that I'm looking for would be for you to delegate signatory authority for the agreement to Sheriff Pat Eliason. And what this covers is the filming period, which is just an overnight period between the 24th and 25th. It covers any conflict of use. So for example, if somebody is arrested and they need to be booked and these spaces need to be used, the sheriff's office will get priority. They are going to make an effort to for alternative arrangements if possible, but that may not be possible, and the film company is agreeing to that. We do agree to make one more try at rescheduling if their filming is interrupted for that reason. It covers insurance, it covers data practices issues, so and Department of Corrections rules. The crew will be minimal. The equipment they bring in will be minimal. They've identified the spaces inside the building that they will be filming. They will be supervised at all times that they're filming. They have agreed to follow COVID-19 protocols in place by the governor. There's one more paragraph I need to add related to they'll have like temporary ability to lock and unlock a cell because their actor needs to do that. And I got a voicemail back from Gary Fagerman, our jail administrator, this morning about the procedure for that, and it appears to be protective of the county. If any of the conditions that I outline in paragraph 2, there are conditions of filming. If any of these conditions are violated and it's discovered during filming, we have the right to ask them to leave immediately. If any of the conditions are violated and we find out afterwards, we have the right to ask for them to destroy part or all of the film that was taken at the jail. Of course, we don't anticipate any of that happening. This appears to be a reputable operation and kind of exciting to have a film done on the North Shore. They are filming all the way, as I understand it, from Duluth all the way up to Grand Marais, and it's a science fiction type film. There's a Star Tribune article, which I didn't read, but I think County Administrator Yorkie did read it. And so I'm here to address any questions.
Thank you, Attorney Hicken. And I haven't been too involved in these conversations, but have heard a little discussion about it. And it sounds like Sheriff Eliason is generally on board with this. My only real concern is just undue burden on Sheriff Eliason and the department, just county resources. I recognize that our organization will not be receiving any benefit from this, but I do know that these types of activities do have a general positive economic benefit. I think that's oftentimes why communities go after this, and we did not go after it. They came to us. So it just sounds like an opportunity. But again, my only concern is on the burden of the sheriff and the department. But it sounds like that's going to be mitigated just fine. So do any other commission, I mean, I know this is probably brand new item here for our consideration here, but what are your questions? What are your concerns? See if we can get those answered. Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the compensation and why we don't treat it like a lease. Why does it go to Pat's charity or Sheriff Elias? Sorry.
So the charity is unidentified in the agreement. We don't know. That part is highlighted because I wasn't involved in any of those discussions. It needs to be addressed. If the commissioners have a specific request as to how we approach that in negotiations, I would hear that request.
Well, I guess my first reaction is, well, let's put it towards the budget. That's where I come from. But I'm just looking for what the discussion was and why, I guess. And how much are we talking?
Right. Well, perhaps I could address any questions about the legal language, and as to the business arrangement, we could call in Sheriff Eliason later in the meeting. He's not here right now, but I had to kind of duck in between court hearings.
That's a good clarification. Yeah. And thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. I think it's an excellent question. And yeah, so maybe we'll try to hone any particular questions on the legal side of things right now, and then hopefully, I don't know, Administrator Yorkie, if you can get a hold of Sheriff Eliason, or perhaps you know some of these answers as well. But do any commissioner? Yeah. So let me qualify the request. Do any commissioners have any questions, legal questions for Attorney Hicken that she could help us navigate?
I will make one comment, if I may,
Please.
about compensation. It should be tied, at least loosely, to our actual costs, the actual inconvenience of maybe having somebody there to supervise. Governments shouldn't be making profit, of course. Everything we charge has to be tied back to the actual expense of the operation. And maybe Sheriff Eliason could comment further on that.
Yes, and perhaps I'm definitely stepping out of my lane here. Perhaps the contribution from the film company to a charitable organization can be greater than the amount that would be an actual organizational cost for us. So maybe it's doing more good than rather just compensating what our actual costs would be. That's a guess. I don't know anything. Any other questions for Attorney Hicken? Mr. Yorkie?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, but I just want to let you know we are trying to reach Sheriff Eliason, but he's currently unavailable, but we'll keep trying.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you. We can come back to this too. I just appreciated Attorney Hicken's availability at this moment, and so if there are particular legal questions, I thought we could address those now, and we can come back to this when it's back in the agenda, or as Sheriff Eliason is available for that matter. Okay. Well, just to clarify, when the time comes, if this would be approved, you're asking for the signatory to be Sheriff Eliason. Was there another request that we need to keep in mind here?
So you can approve it in its basic form, but allow minor changes pursuant to county attorney approval, county administrator approval.
Okay. Well, and I think it's probably best that we discuss if we can with Sheriff Eliason before we look for a motion. So I guess without any further questions for legal clarification, I would suggest that we go back to the Highway Department portion of the agenda.
Thank you so much for accommodating me. Have a good meeting.
Thank you for coming. All right, so that brings us to item D of the Highway Department, and that was in regards to the Trimble controller that we pulled from the consent agenda. And Administrator Yorkie, you had requested to pull that. And Engineer Haas, did you want to maybe go into that a little bit, or Mr. Yorkie, did you want to address it first?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to have some discussion about this because it is an unbudgeted expense, and I just thought it warranted some elaboration.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, Engineer Haas, could you go into it a little bit more, please?
Absolutely. So this was another thing that was part of the capital improvement plan that Josh and I, and well, all of us here at the Highway Department have been putting together. This is part of our survey equipment. And so this is kind of I've been trying to think of a good way to make it a little easier to understand what these are. It's kind of like the brains of the machine. So basically, like, it allows us to do our jobs. As the description says, we've had these for so long that they aren't compatible with the current version of Windows anymore. That's pretty old. And so there's some workarounds we can do if we really, really need to. But at this point, I think they're coming up on 15-ish years old. And this is something that, similar to how Josh was describing calcium chloride adjustments and gravel things are being pulled from his salary back before he was brought on. Similarly, these particular controllers, due to COVID and having our travel expenses be almost non-existent, and similarly our vacant engineering tech position, we're able to I'll say budget for these controllers. There's another aspect to the machines. It's kind of like the GPS part of it. Those are in the capital improvement plan. Those are more expensive. And so those we have in our kind of big overarching plan, but with these in particular, this was something that, for even surveying this summer, being able to purchase those now is going to make life that much better. Like I said, we could try and find an old computer with an old version of Windows that is not connected to the internet or anything. The hard part with that, though, is then we would only have one station in the office that would be able to do that, as opposed to just being able to be out in the field, working from home, whatever it might be. So, yeah, if anybody has any questions about it, I hopefully have some answers.
All right, thank you, Engineer Haas. Any commissioners have questions here? Commissioner Hawkins, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, another one. I'm confused. Sorry, again.
Sure, it's okay.
Have to explain to me. So we've had these, and how long have we known that they aren't compatible or that it wasn't?
Well, just with this current version. So whatever Windows 10, I think, is relatively new. And I think my understanding is whatever latest update just happened with Windows 10, they don't talk to each other anymore. And so that puts us at either, kind of, like I said, finding an old computer that isn't connected to anything, and then we can at least have one place to do this. Or, this is something that we've had budgeted, as I mentioned, in our capital improvement plan. It's just pulling the trigger, I guess, now, because we have some funds we can shuffle around to get them. At least the controller part of it. We can't do the other part. They're called heads. Those are more expensive, and those are in our long-ranging plan. And so, yeah.
And I'm just trying to make the connection between your department and Rena's department as far as technology and making sure things don't become out of date. So,
yes. So this is a little.
How does that work?
Sure. No, so this is our actual survey equipment. So this is what our crew goes, our engineering department goes out, and how, the guys in the field, and you see the tripod set up. this is the stuff they're using. So that's our end of things. That's, very highway specific, it's, surveying equipment versus, MIS's department. What they set up is, more of our IT stuff for the whole county, our computers, our cameras, how we're doing this right now, that kind of stuff. When it's as specific as it is, with the surveying type equipment, then that's falls on us. Did that answer your question? Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, mine is a follow-up from Commissioner Hawkins, and that is, I recognize, as you say, that, MIS normally doesn't do the activities, they do them on a larger scale. But did you actually ask if there was some type of a bridging application for this new update that could help accommodate or carry us a little further with our current equipment?
Yes, and that update is to unplug it from the internet and not update it anymore. So that's what it
I
is.
anticipated that's what the answer was. I just wanted to make sure, as a follow-up to her question, that in fact that outreach had been done and that was the answer.
Correct. Yes. And now Rena's going to yell. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, Rena.
I would just say that Windows 7 and anything Windows 7 and before is not supported anymore by Microsoft, so it becomes a security risk, and that's why Robbie keeps mentioning that he has to unplug it from our internet because it creates risk to the rest of our network. So this happens sometimes. Vendors don't keep their stuff updated, and as operating systems get updated and things go out of date, it just happens. And it's not stuff that I'm watching, as Robbie said. He's watching it on his end. There's just a lot of devices plugged in to a lot of things right now. So, but anything newer than Windows 10 now, and this was a long process that Windows warns you about for like years, that they're gonna, end this, and they ended it, and so we knew. But no, we cannot plug it into anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rena.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners? Myself, I appreciate just shuffling funds around. It was not budgeted for, but it will stay within our overall highway budget. And so I appreciate having flexibility there and trying to work with what we got and also work with what we got. Recognizing sometimes you can't work with what you have.
We're doing our best.
Thank you for your work and efforts there. Okay, well, entertain a motion here. Commissioner Sullivan.
I move to approve the purchase of the 2 Trimble controllers.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner Swalson.
Swalson, seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Swalson. Any further discussion here? Hearing none and seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Swalson.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. Approved unanimously. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Engineer Haas. I think that's the last item under the Highway Department here. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you, everybody.
And I see that Sheriff Eliason was able to join us. Thank you, Sheriff Eliason, for jumping on short notice here. And I would like to be respectful of your time and now jump on our agenda back down to item 11A, which was about the location or the potential filming at the sheriff's office. And just from my perspective, I haven't been very involved in these conversations, but I've been briefed on them. My biggest concerns is undue burden on yourself and your department, but I get the impression that you're generally okay with this, and I just wanted to touch base there. And other people other commissioners had other questions as well. Do you want to say anything before we start asking you questions, or I guess my only question is, do you feel like this is going to work all right within your department?
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, commissioners, for having me on. Yes, we feel that we can accommodate most of what they want. As far as escorting them, they'll need to be escorted the entire time inside the building. And myself and Jail Administrator Gary Fagerman have agreed to take on that task. So we will not be burdening any of the dispatchers or deputies from their regular duties to assist with that.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins, I believe you had a question about the compensation.
Yeah, I was just concerned about where the compensation for this filming is going and how much it is.
That's a good question, because I don't know.
Well, I think the donut shop got like $500 when there was a film crew there. So I'm curious, did they come up with a number for you of what
I've not heard of any numbers, no.
Okay. Well, I know that Attorney Hicken and maybe Chairman Mills said we can't make money off of it, but there will be a cost. And I just think maybe the money I want to make sure stays in the community. And, it says that it's a donation of your choice. And I just like to know what you're thinking.
Well, if there is some money coming and it's a donation of my choice, I would probably defer that choice to you, members of the board, and you guys can decide where it should go.
Well, that makes it complicated. No, that's as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. That's great. I think kind of where Commissioner Hawkins was coming from was just if it could go back into the budget, if there's any costs we incur there, that would be great. I was going out on a limb and guessing that because Attorney Hicken mentioned we cannot charge beyond what our costs are. And so my inference there was that they very well may donate more than what our actual costs would be, and so that hence the donation to a nonprofit or what have you. So, Commissioner Hawkins, please.
And I'm sorry I keep asking questions, but isn't it kind of like we're leasing space to them for a night? And can't we just say the lease price is $500 or whatever? I guess that was a question I should have asked when Attorney Hicken was here. Sorry, it just popped into my head.
Oh, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer, but I think it would take it may be difficult to get an actual cost for the actual space for the actual time, and so it may not be worth our time to do that, but it is important to have details worked out here. So I think your questions are valid there. I just myself I don't know. I don't suspect Sheriff Eliason knows. And please, Sheriff Eliason.
I would just recommend if we do get a donation, obviously. There's going to be time spent for myself and Jail Administrator Fagerman. We would either put the donation into personnel services account or back into the building account for operational expenses. I would recommend either of those two.
Those are very good recommendations. Thank you. Mr. Yorkie, can you shed any more light into options or some of the concerns?
I cannot. I've not actually had any direct conversations with the film crew. I only became aware of this project last week, so I don't really have anything to add.
Okay. Okay. Well, any further questions for Sheriff Eliason from commissioners? Or any concerns, any further concerns? I feel like my concerns are covered. Thank you, Sheriff Eliason, for addressing those.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Powers.
Just to throw out, just to put some context, let's say Sheriff's Department, between the sheriff and the jailer, I haven't looked at them specifically, but let's say it's $50 an hour for their time, either one or the other on average. And it says they're there for, it's 10 hours in the proposed contract. I don't know if that's the total burden, but that's what it says, 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. So let's just say 10 hours. At 50, says the burden there for escort be around $500, just to give some general context to it.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Gives us some amount to keep in mind there. Well, here we are, and I'm going to entertain a motion. Commissioner Sullivan.
So I'd like to move to provide signatory authority to Sheriff Eliason once the contract has been approved by our county administrator and Molly Hicken.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support? Commissioner Svalson.
Commissioner Svalson will support.
Thank you, Commissioner Svalson. We have a motion and support. Is there any further discussion? We should do more of this, huh?
What?
That was a joke, but I do recognize the value that there is. It's good to be able to cooperate with outside organizations. It's good to spur economic activity, and I really appreciate just being able to support our sheriff's department as best we can here. I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Svalson.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
And Commissioner Mills is an aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you again, Sheriff Eliason.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you. I hope we can all go see the movie when it comes out.
I'm very curious. All right, so that brings us down to item 9, but I would like just to take a 5-minute recess here, get up, stretch your legs, and be back here. I'm sorry, 7-minute. Let's be back here at 10:20. is 10:20. We do have Commissioner Starley. Do we have Commissioner Hawkins? We have Commissioner Hawkins. We have Mr. Yorkie. Do we have Mr. Lane? Do we have Mr. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I just saw him out in the hallway. I'll double check to see if he's still out there.
Classic Mr. Lane, huh?
I still have 10:19, so we still got a minute or so.
Fair enough. I see there's activity on. There he is, yes.
I
Mr.
agree
Yorkie?
with Commissioner Sullivan's timetable.
Very good. All right, well, we're back. We are on item 9A. I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. This is a request to amend a conditional use permit, which was 2016 origin. 2016-73 was the exact resolution number approved by your some of the same commissioner members, but also those who have left. And this is for a recreational use, conditional use permit out on the Irish Creek Road and adjacent to the Arrowhead Trail. Linda Newman in 2016 asked for a conditional use permit to allow a more expansive recreational use on her 40-acre property. And if you've looked at the packet and also the FAR 1 zone district, it's pretty inclusive as far as what's allowed. And in this case, everything that she proposed to do is recreational based. She does a lot of mushing, kennel tours, mindful paddling, things like that. Her website, pointsunknown.com, is really a good overview of what her use is on the property. And truly, in the sense of the location, it's one of those really good fits for the recreational use. And the Planning Commission, during their discussion following the presentation on April 14th, really demonstrated that this seemed to be a good fit. The only issue that came up was the question of when recreational use interferes with the commercial activity. And from our perspective in a land services permitting rich environment, the commercial activity is really an assessor's issue. It's not our issue. So that being said, the discussion was really favorable for Ms. Newman's request. Basically what she wants to do, at the 2016 conditional use permit allowed her to have lodging facilities on her property. And what she wants to do now is to expand that to have a more rustic presence, including 2 rustic cabins and 2 primitive campsites, which would both be supported by privy vault outhouses. So septic compliance would be demonstrated and that sort of thing. Typically if there's a long discussion, there's more contention. And in this case, it was really just to have the nuts and bolts questions answered. And in this case, the Planning Commission was very satisfied with Ms. Newman's response. Land Services has been an advocate for this use since 2016. And it's a good fit with the land use guide plan and the Cook County zoning ordinance. And accordingly, it was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission with recommendation that the Board of Commissioners also approve it. And there you have it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lane. And Ms. Newman did introduce herself during public comment earlier in the meeting, and she is with us again if we have any questions. And so I guess I'll turn to commissioners now and ask if we have any questions for either Mr. Lane or Ms. Newman. I don't see any. I don't hear any either. I certainly appreciate the report from the Planning Commission and the discussion there and the nuts and bolts. I think that's really good to go over. I appreciate the assessor's involvement there as well. Mr. Yorkie, I see you're unmuted. Did you have any comment there or any question? Oh, okay, sorry. You can stay unmuted. I just noticed it. All right. Well, I don't see any questions or hear any questions, so I'd open it up to a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Svalson.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the request to amend the resolution 2016-73, allowing the placement of 2 cabins and 2 primitive campsites within the FAR-1 zone district.
Thank you, Commissioner Svalson. We have a motion. Is there support? Commissioner Sullivan.
Sullivan supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Svalson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Lane. Thank you, Ms. Newman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Have a good morning.
Have a wonderful day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
That brings us. Oh, bye-bye. That brings us down to item 10A, MIS. Ms. Rogers. Good morning again, and Mr. Watkins.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, commissioners, colleagues, community members, if there's any still out there. So our request today is to approve the purchase of the diagnostics over-the-air waveform analyzer for $50,235.87. This was something we budgeted for last year, and we also answered the call that Auditor Powers put out about spending the last remaining dollars of the equipment bond. So this will be partially funded out of our radio capital fund that we get from tower fees, and partly out of the equipment bond. So there's a number that's plugged in there, 28,022, but that could be slightly altered depending on what Auditor Powers tells us. So just a moment about this piece of equipment and why it's important, why we were budgeting for it. I see that Rowan is on as well. So I have a tendency to do this at the 60,000 foot level. And so if you have more specific questions, Commissioner Hawkins, he will be able to be one that answers them. So these Armor radios are like other devices. They, you tune them kind of like a guitar. I'm familiar with that. And over time they go out of tune. With these kinds of radios, when they go out of tune, they don't work because they're digital. So they're either kind of off or on. And in the past, we have over 800 of these radios out there. And in the past, what we did was like every 3 years, which is about the average time they need to be retuned, we would just hold these huge events at the fire halls and try to get everybody there. And, they would come in the evening and we would do, tune all the radios in that fire hall over a couple of nights. It's a pretty big effort and it involved a lot of overtime. Plus that, there would be sometimes radios that didn't work well or didn't work at all in between those time spans that we weren't catching. So what happens with this is we move it around from tower location to tower location, and it actually can tell us whose radio is working and whose isn't. And then we have kind of a list and we can contact those people and they can bring in their radio and have it tuned. So it flattens out the operational piece of this quite a bit. Allows it to be a few minutes here or there rather than these big efforts, big communication, a lot of overtime. So it was the reason that we were already going to do it, but we're kind of getting pushed along a little bit here by the equipment bond and the need to do that before the end of this month when the money has to be spent. So Rowan, did I say all that okay, or you want to sharpen my edges just a little bit?
No, I think that was very accurate. Yeah, I think the main part is that it operationalizes something that is a reoccurring project that is a huge consumption of not only our time, but it puts pressure on volunteers as well. Majority of all radio users, but majority volunteer fire departments to be somewhere at a specific time, specific date, to allow us to correct any issues. And it's just so much more efficient. This allows us to actually see the radios that have issues or are trending towards having an issue, becoming out of tune, and only target those radios as opposed to just this mass tuning and catching them all.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have some questions for Ms. Rogers or Mr. Watkins? Commissioner Hawkins.
I kind of feel like I have to now, but no, I appreciate another thing that I Googled that was way over my head. So I do appreciate you making it, using words that I can understand. Thank you for that. And I also want to thank you that it was in your budget, that you had planned for this purchase. And it just so happens that we have some money that we can use so it doesn't come out of your budget. I appreciate you planning ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Oh, yes, please.
Sorry, one more. How long
Yes,
is this
please.
piece of equipment going to last?
I'll let Rowan answer that.
So we've actually used a piece of equipment like this in the past. We borrowed it from Murray County, and they've had theirs since around 2005, and it's still working. So they haven't had to do any maintenance or service issues or had any troubles with it. So the only other person in the state that I know who has one has a very good track record with it.
That was I had that same question, Commissioner Hawkins. Thank you for asking it. Yeah, I was also going to ask, do we have to tune the tuner? Is that a thing, or?
I think you can send it in to be calibrated, but I think in the white paper that we have, it says that it lasts for a fairly long time. So maybe once every few years, you might send it in to be calibrated again.
Any other questions from commissioners? Hearing none, seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Sullivan.
I'd like to move to approve the purchase of the diagnostics over-the-air waveform analyzer. That's a mouthful.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support?
Storley support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none and seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Swalson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Ms. Rogers and Mr. Watkins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
That brings us down to item 11, and we covered item 11A already. And then item 11B we'll be putting off, I'm afraid, due to scheduling conflict with our mini training and talking about the bylaws, which should be a good discussion and a good mini training as well. But we'll do that at another time. That brings us down to item 12, auditor, and the only item that was posted on our agenda is that what we moved down from the consent agenda, which was 3I, Emergency Management Performance Grant. And I believe Commissioner Hawkins was looking for a little more information on that, Mr. Powers. Or Commissioner Hawkins, did you have specific questions you'd like to ask?
No, I would just notice that, okay, so this is for a 2020 budget item. So I wanted to know how that's handled in our budget documents that we will be getting. And are we also expecting a 2021 grant?
Commissioner Hawkins, I don't have the answer to that. Actually, I anticipated that that was the question. And Mike is actually the best source of that information. I sent him that question about an hour ago, and I haven't seen a response yet. But this is an annual grant. It's been roughly the same for about 10 years. And before that, we got the same grant, but it was less money. It's been in this $16,000 range for about 10 years. So it's just a question for the state if they, for some reason, are they going to catch up because we didn't get it last year, or is that one just go by? I don't know the answer to that, but can report back. Might be able to find that out, and if we can get that answer before you go off the air, we'll do it. Otherwise, I'll give you that answer later. So,
thank you,
Commissioner Mills. This is Mike. I'm on the call here. What the story is we did get it last year, but it was 2019. What happened when the pandemic started? Everything got backlogged. So this grant typically is available in October and is usually approved by year's end. But because of COVID, it got behind. So they are hoping that the 2021 will be this fall and be approved before the end of the year. So it is a little confusing, but as Brady said, it's been the same for Cook County for quite a number of years, and the matching requirement just it's no match really. It's just my budget supports the monies that we get every year. It's actually federal dollars filtered down through the state, and it's based on population as to what we get. So that's the gist of it.
Great. Yeah, so with new census numbers, perhaps we'll have new grant numbers then, if it's based on population. Any other questions, comments, discussion from commissioners about this item? Don't see any, I don't hear any, so I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Hawkins.
I'll make the motion to accept the emergency, I don't have it in front of me, the emergency operations grant from the state.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion, and just to clarify, emergency management performance grant.
Thank you.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Swallison?
And Swallison supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Swallison. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallison?
Aye.
Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Keyport. Thank you, Mr. Powers. And then, Mr. Powers, do you have any other items that need to come before the board today?
I do not, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us down to item 13, Administrator. Administrator Yorkie. You're on mute, though.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, commissioners. The first item under my section of the agenda concerns a request that we received from the Gitchigami Trail Association regarding some funding that it is expecting to receive from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. This request came to my office and to Commissioner Storley, and so I wanted to see if Commissioner Storley wanted to talk about this, or I'm happy either way.
Thank you. I'm on the Gitchigami Trail Association meeting every other month, and as you have always observed, going up and down the shore, the trail is being extended in various places, and this particular request is for our support. in having the Gitche Trail extend from the Ski Hill Road to downtown Lutzen, preferably to the Caribou Trail. And so as you can see, the organizations, the businesses, the individuals, and all of us board members are signed on because we need support from the legislature. We have great representation with Senator Bach and Representative Eklund supporting us in our endeavors, because the legislature likes to look at completion of trails. And as you know, you have the one from Grand Marais to Cut Face. So a completion from Ski Hill Road to downtown Lutzen or a little bit beyond would be another completion, which means then that would be completed all the way from Schroeder all the way up through Lutzen. There's a portion right now that's being worked on in Tofty. So we didn't want a resolution. We just wanted to say, along with the other county, that we support the endeavors of continuing the trail.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Mr. Yorkie, any further comments, or should I open it up to the board? Questions and comments?
Nothing for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Questions, comments, commissioners? I don't see any, I don't hear any, so I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve and sign the attached letter for Cook County to support the Gitchigami Trail Association.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Commissioner Sullivan?
Sullivan supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hear none or see none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Starley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Swalson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is an aye as well. We have unanimous approval for a letter of support there. Thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Starley. And thank you, Mr. Yorkie. Moving on to item 13B.
Yes, so this is a letter from the Forest Service regarding a request for comments. The Forest Service is proposing to make some changes in its trail system, authorizing mushing trails, decommissioning certain unused trails, modifying or restoring rather road stream crossings and decommissioning certain roads, and then also providing off-highway vehicle access to several roads and campgrounds. And I wasn't sure, I guess I'm not sure how the board typically handles these kinds of requests, but I thought it was important for you all to be aware of the request for comments and also for our community members to be aware of it, since this may be certain activities that folks in the community enjoy. And so I just wanted to put it out there for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Yorkie. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a number of questions and sent those to Ori Hatcher, who is the East Zone planner for the U.S. Forest Service. And I did want to share, I got some very timely responses this morning. One of my questions was regarding public input. We had not seen anything till we received this letter and got information recently in the Cook County News Herald. But there was information that was solicited over the last couple of years, actually, through the Cook County Dog Mushers, the tribal bands, and also the 1854 Treaty Authority. And there was also input received from owners near the areas where OHV trails were going to be opened up. So I did want to share that with everyone. And I know you and I, Commissioner Mills, shared a question about how removing culverts can be beneficial. And I did get a response that I would like to share with you regarding that. It's stated that failed culverts, such as those on Forest Road 316 or redundant ones like the one on Forest Service Road 152, are the target of the proposed actions, and that failed culverts do not provide for adequate aquatic organism passage by disrupting the flow that would occur in more natural hydraulic states. Failed culverts can produce excessive sedimentation to waterways that's unnatural and detrimental to the aquatic ecosystem. So they have more detailed discussion of some of the alternatives, and there's a section on soils and wetlands in some of the larger documents they have, but I was very appreciative of their response and felt it was quite thorough.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Commissioner Hawkins, I saw your hand up as well.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. You answered my questions, so thank you very much. I also had some concerns about some of the language in there and wanted to make sure that the public knew about this process. This was new to me. Obviously, I didn't read the paper. So I was just wondering about, is this something appropriate to put out on our website so people know that they can make comments? I guess I was concerned about the loss of motorized vehicles on some roads, so that was my concern.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I just hate to see things getting shut down in our county as far as roads and trails, and it's something we're trying to support more. So the Parks and Trails Commission has not been involved in this discussion at all, and so and just based on the frequency of meetings, I don't think they will be, but I would like to try to strengthen our partnership with the Forest Service and the Parks and Trails Commission, but digging in a little bit and getting those timely responses is great to hear. But yeah, if we could post this so that more people are aware of it and can add comments, I think that'd be great. I was a little alarmed at the timing. I think the letter is dated from the 20th, and so it was 30 days from the posting in the News Herald, which that is on the 27th actually. So we have until May 27th for public to submit comments. But I think that's all we need to talk about, it appears, at this point. And please, public, send in your comments, questions, and concerns to the Forest Service there. Ori Hatcher, I believe, is the contact. Unless there's anything else, I'll move on to item 13C.
All right. So the board will recall from our recent building tour that we went through the recycling center, and for the benefit of folks who were not on that tour, for our viewers today, the recycling center has a loading area where throughout the year our staff work unloading semi-trailers and also reloading them. The area in which this occurs is currently uninsulated and not temperature controlled. And that means that in the summer, it can get very hot back there, and in the winter, it gets bitterly cold. When it's negative 30 outside, it is negative 30 in the loading dock, literally, because there's no insulation there. And so we have our staff working in some pretty inhospitable conditions. And on the tour, we talked about this, and I think there was recognition from all board members that this is not a good situation, and we want to do better by our staff. And so we've sought bids for some work to be done on the recycling center that would involve insulating the back area, the loading dock area. It would also involve making structural modifications to allow for easier passage for forklifts between the conditioned space and the currently unconditioned space. And so there would have to be a structural beam put in and an opening enlarged to allow for passage of that equipment. The bids also include, or at least the scope that we asked the contractors to bid on, included some electrical work and also the installation of some heaters to make sure that that space would be warm in the winter. And so we received 2 bids, which are included in your board packet. One was from a local construction company, J.J. Lillistrand. And then we also got a bid from 4-Star Construction, which is out of Superior, Wisconsin. And you can see in looking at the 2 proposals that one is fairly bare bones. The local bid is pretty lacking in detail, I would say. The other bid is much more detailed. And then there's also a difference in price. And I want to talk about that because you'll notice that the 4-Star bid is good for only 15 days from the date of submittal. And that gets to the issue that I think Robbie House was talking about a little bit earlier, where construction materials have really just been bouncing all over the place, and they're much higher than they have been at any point in recent memory. So that's kind of driving the dynamic here with the bids and creating the very short window within which you have to make a decision on this. And so, the other thing I wanted to mention about this is that this project would be funded not with levy dollars, but with funding from the landfill fund, which was established long ago to create a source of funding for the replacement of the Cook County landfill, which at this point is not going to be replaced because the costs of siting and constructing a Subtitle D landfill far exceed what benefit we would get out of it, because we just don't have the volume of waste. It's much more cost effective to send our municipal solid waste out of the county. And so that's what we're doing now and will continue to do. So that funding is available for various solid waste related projects, and this one would qualify for that. So we have 2 bids, the Lillistrand bid at $108,682 and the 4-Star bid at $123,305. And that's a difference of about $14,600. Now, in considering these bids, I kind of look at them as I would from a homeowner's perspective, which I am a homeowner, and thinking about how I would feel in making a decision on one or the other of these bids. I would certainly want to, number one, I would try to go for the lower cost bid if I could, if it made sense. And certainly trying to keep county dollars in the county should be one of our guiding principles. So whenever possible, we should be trying to do that. That said, I still have some concerns about the local bid in terms of the level of detail. And I think if we are to move forward on this, we would need a more detailed proposal so that we're all clear, both us and the contractor, on what exactly the scope of the project is. So, I was hoping to come to you today with a recommendation, but I think there's still some outstanding questions that need to be answered before we can actually determine which of these 2 bids would be the better course of action for the county. I would also offer, I did try to reach JJ last week and was unable to get a hold of him. His voicemail box was full, and I texted him, I didn't hear back. But Commissioner Hawkins kindly agreed to try to run him down and was able to do so. And so she does have some additional information that I'll ask her to share at this point.
Yeah, I talked to JJ last night and explained my hesitation about his bid or lack of detail in his bid. He assured me that electrical was included in his bid, and he described everything. I'm not a contractor, so there's more language I didn't understand I was asking him about. I personally feel confident that JJ can do this job. I agree with Administrator Yorkie. It would have been nice to have it all written out, but he mentioned that, well, you noticed that his bid was dated April 2nd. And at the time he did it, he was under the impression he needed to hurry up and just write something up, get a bid in. So I don't think it would be a problem to go back and ask him to detail it more. I also want to make sure, I would prefer that we spend tax dollars locally rather than somebody out of state if we can do it that way. But I feel confident that JJ can do this project. So.
And one other thing relates to the timing of the project. So we're hoping to get this work done before winter comes. And it wasn't clear when JJ would be able to get to it, but Commissioner Hawkins, I understand that he thinks he would be able to start in June. And also the four-star construction bid, they indicated that they would be able to start in September. So either way, we expect this work would be completed before the cold returns.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Yorkie, and thank you, Commissioner Hawkins, for following up with JJ. That helps a lot. Do any commissioners have any questions or please?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I wanted to know if Brian Silence, our maintenance director, is on the meeting, and I wanted to invite him to add anything that he may have in terms of this discussion.
Good morning, all. I feel the same as James. I feel we need to move ahead on this. One thing I will add is that JJ's bid was early on, and we just went back to 4-star and got this new quote from them, and it had gone up about $10,000, I believe. So in all fairness to JJ, his bid may go up also because of the building material costs increase. So that's something that we probably should to revisit with him also.
So I guess, you know, what I'd like some guidance from the board on is we can certainly follow up with JJ and get additional information and try to get a more detailed bid along with an updated cost if in fact his costs have gone up. But I really think that detail is really important because, for example, I don't see anything in the proposal he provided us that speaks to the electrical work or the heaters that he would install. And Commissioner Hawkins confirmed that he would be installing a couple of heaters. The other thing that I think is important to look at is what equipment exactly would be installed, because this comes back to the discussion we had on the building tour about, you know, are we installing the cheapest thing we can do, or are we installing something that's going to last and provide value? And I argue for not doing the cheapest thing, but doing the thing that provides the greatest value over the life of the equipment. And so if we need to spend a little bit more upfront to get lower operating costs and lower overall lifetime cost of ownership, that's what we should be shooting for.
Commissioner Sullivan.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered if we could set a timeline to get a more complete bid from JJ in order that we don't lose our opportunity with 4-star. I would like to see this done sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Yeah, Commissioner Storley.
Yes, I think the 4-star has laid out a really good area here of each room and so forth, and walls and ceiling and all that. So could this be kind of the guideline that we would ask JJ to look at room by room? How much do you think? There's a lot of plywood involved in this, and plywood, as Brian said, has gone up out of the ceiling, in other words. So, you know, I think all of that has to be taken into consideration for a quote from him.
So the other thing to note, the date on the 4-star bid is May 4th, and the proposal is good for 15 days. So that would put us at May 19th, which is 8 days from now. So we would need to get a detailed bid from JJ, an updated cost from him well before that, so we could compare apples to apples and make a final decision on whether to move forward with one or the other.
I would agree with that. And then if we need to have a special meeting to determine which proposal we're going to accept, we could do that.
And I think that would be problematic. I mean, I think we have to provide at least 3 days notice to call a special meeting.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if we could get some kind of provisional approval from the board. And I know this is complicated, but I'd like to be able, I want to streamline this so that we can get this project in the pipeline and get the work done. And so maybe some provisional approval or authorizing me to work with Brian to make a decision about which proposal to select. Again, with the guiding principle being that we give preference to a local vendor. We look at the overall cost, but also look at the lifetime cost estimated related to the mechanical equipment. I don't know if we can do that or not, but I'd just like to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity, like Commissioner Sullivan said.
Okay. Well, for myself, I feel very strongly that we should support a local contractor as much as possible. That being said, I happen to know all local contractors are pretty booked, pretty busy, but still I feel like it's our responsibility and our duty to work with local if at all possible. We also need to be careful, though. I know from my experience on the city council that if we give unfair preference to locals, there can be backlash and repercussions for trying to get other projects done down the road. So I hope that we're not damaging any future potential with either company. But if we can nail down some of those specifics, I think it'd be very, very useful and the best way to go with our local contractors. So please, Mr. Yorkie.
Yes, the other thing that should be mentioned is we have worked with both of these contractors before, and Brian can speak to that in more detail.
Yeah, we've used both contractors. Both of them do a really good job. I don't see a problem with using them. It's just like James had said, is that we should make sure that we're getting the best quality. We've had some issues at the recycle center with other additions that didn't quite work out so well. So we want to do it right if we're going to go ahead with this.
Good. Yeah, that helps me. I have confidence in JJ. I don't have any experience with 4-star, so that helps me just gain a little perspective there. But so I guess what we're looking for here is some kind of provisional authorization to go ahead. And as far as the provisions are concerned, how specific do we want to get? One thing, I mean, Commissioner Storley mentioned how 4-star kind of broke it out there, and that was actually, one thing that stood out to me as well. However, what I did not like was that their costs were not broken out, just the room by room. And so even just something as simple as materials and labor, I find to be very good information to have when making decisions. So I don't know if we need to request that provision specifically, but having more of a breakout, I think, would be important, and just having all of the items clearly defined, including electrical and the heaters, I think would be helpful. But any further thoughts from commissioners, or are we ready for a motion, a provisional motion? Or?
I guess.
Go ahead, Mr. Yorkie.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The other thing is we do have a special meeting scheduled for the 17th. Now, the focus of that meeting is entirely different from what we're talking about here. And I am reluctant to dilute that focus at all. But that said, if there were a need to discuss this, that agenda could be modified, and it's already advertised as a public meeting. So that would be an option. I don't want to subvert any process here, but I also recognize that the window to act is pretty short.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not in favor of using that special meeting for anything other than its purpose. And I think legally we cannot use it for anything other than its purpose unless we amend the creation of the meeting. But I think we should stay focused on that. I would like to hear more commissioner comments just about further information that you feel is necessary before we can give the provisional authorization to Administrator Yorkie and Mr. Silence. Commissioner Swalson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had gotten the impression in our earlier discussions and during our building tours that most everyone was aligned that something needed to be done, and the bids that were called out, although not specific on JJ's bid, they certainly were addressing the issues and focused on what we were looking to improve. I personally don't have any issue with moving with the provisional approval. The approval being that we are ready to move forward with this based on getting updated bids so that you can make a better selection process. And I'm perfectly comfortable allowing, with what we're seeing in the bids right now, even recognizing, as Brian says, that we expect really that JJ's bid would likely change based on the cost of materials, but allowing Administrator Yorkie to then evaluate the two bids and make the right decision for our county and the recycling center.
Thank you, Commissioner Swalson. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. Is that a motion?
It can be if you want it to be, or I can make it more formal. I thought we were still in discussion.
Yeah, I was half joking, but yes, please. I would like to hear more commissioner thoughts.
I certainly, Mr. Chair, and for the rest of the commissioners, like to see those bids be more parallel so that when Administrator Yorkie and Mr. Silence are examining them, that we're comparing apples to apples. And right now it's very, very difficult to do that with those two very differing bids.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Any further commissioner thoughts? Well, then I think our discussion has ended. But if there is a motion, there can be further discussion, turns out. So at this point, I would entertain a motion.
I will make the motion to provisionally approve going forward with the improvement process at the recycle center based on updated bids and review by Mr. Silence and Administrator Yorkie, and providing Administrator Yorkie signatory approval for that bid process.
Thank you, Commissioner Swalson. I feel like that was thorough. Is there a second?
Storley, support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. There's motion and support. Further discussion? Maybe we don't have any further discussion. In that case, I will do a roll call vote. Commissioner Swalson?
Aye.
Commissioner Starley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you very much, commissioners, and thank you, Mr. Yorkie. Thank you, Mr. Silence.
Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, I'm excited to move forward on this. You know, our staff deserve to work in good conditions, and this will enable us to get that done. So thank you. All right, moving on. So I do have a few other items to report on. Yesterday, the long-awaited interim final rule for the American Rescue Plan was issued by the U.S. Department of Treasury. This is the more specific guidance that we have been awaiting for weeks and weeks to shed light on how we can use these new dollars that the county will be receiving. And the amount, just as a reminder, is just a little bit more than $1 million. I think it's about $1 million and roughly $60,000. I just wanted to go over briefly some of the things for which these funds can be used. Supporting public health response is one. So services to contain and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 obviously would be one of those. Behavioral health care services are also included. And then payroll and covered benefits for public health employees who are working on COVID-19 response. The funds can also be used to address negative economic impacts in the community. So delivering assistance to workers and families, supporting small businesses, which we've done in multiple iterations over the last year or so. Speed the recovery of impacted industries, including tourism, travel, and hospitality. And then rebuilding public sector capacity by rehiring staff, replenishing state unemployment insurance funds, and so on. The bill also allows for the replacement of public sector revenue loss. So ensuring the continuity of vital government services is one objective. It provides some guidance on how to calculate revenue. And there's also provision for premium pay for essential workers with prioritization of low and moderate income workers. One thing that I'm really interested in, it also provides for spending on water and sewer infrastructure. And this is something that has great potential for us as we explore ways to address the county's housing shortage, both in terms of housing affordability and availability. We do have some lots here within the city of Grand Marais that are platted but don't have infrastructure. And so this potentially would be an opportunity to look at installing infrastructure that would enable us to consider being able to develop those properties for multifamily and single family residential. There's also money for the expansion of broadband infrastructure. I did call John Tweest a couple of weeks ago to just make him aware that this funding is available and to talk about what the Arrowhead Cooperative's needs are. As you may know, they are anticipating a significant funding, I think on the order of like $14 billion. Am I remembering that right? That sounds like a lot. In any case, funding sufficient to, it's probably a million, right? To finish installing curb or to provide broadband connections to the curb for the remaining homes in the county that don't have that access. So that's another thing. Equity-focused services, so providing funding to address health disparities. And then there's also some guidance on things that are not eligible uses of the funding. So, and it doesn't really, this summary doesn't really provide a lot of detail on that. But bottom line is we now have the guidance that we're needing to come up with a specific plan for spending these dollars. And I've started reaching out already to public health to talk about that component of the work. I'm going to be reaching out to other community partners to talk about the infrastructure component. The other thing that I think is a good opportunity for us is this funding could be used to improve ventilation equipment in county buildings, which is going to be important for maintaining the health of both our staff and folks who come into our buildings to conduct business. And so that's something that we'll be talking about with the building committee this Friday. So that, I just wanted you to be in the loop on that. It's an exciting development, and you'll hear more about our developing plan in the coming weeks. Are there any questions on that item before I move on? All right. I wanted to also let you know I did send out an email to all staff last night indicating that we are going to be reopening the courthouse on June 1st. I did this after consulting with public health and looking at what other counties are doing, and most of our peer counties in the state are in the process of taking the same step. So we are currently at a point where almost 80% of our residents age 16 and older have received at least one COVID vaccine, one shot. And so we are getting very, very close to having 80% of our residents protected from the virus. And that being the case, it feels like this is the right time to take this step. We've been getting a lot of questions from staff on when this is going to happen. And so this lays a course for that. Attached to the email to staff was a set of guidelines for resuming on-site work. In some places, they've called this a return to work policy, but frankly, our staff have been working hard throughout the pandemic, so they're not returning to work, they're just resuming on-site work. And I should mention also that the remote work policy that you passed here within the last month or two remains in effect. So this does not mean that everybody who works in the courthouse will be expected to be back in the building on June 1st. And in fact, that would be counterproductive because we do have areas of the building where we have people sharing offices and they can't socially distance. And so we're still going to be relying on some level of remote working in accordance with the policies that this board approved, and that will be subject to review and approval by supervisors and department directors. So that is kind of the upshot of that effort. The other thing to note is that this means we will no longer have a screener at the front door of the courthouse effective June 1. So Judy Sievertson has been really great in that role. We've been really lucky to have her, and she has been, well, she's just a ray of sunshine every morning when you come into the building, and we love having that, and we're going to miss her. But she's eager to move on and start doing some traveling this summer, so we're happy for her. So that's it for the courthouse reopening, and I'll pause for questions on that.
I don't see any.
All right, so I will move on. Just a heads up, you received a presentation from Dennis Risdall and Joe Swanson at the most recent Committee of the Whole meeting regarding proposed development in the West End. And you also heard from Rob Dieter, who has another proposal to develop a project that would have housing. Both these projects would have housing. And there's been a request to develop a TIF and tax abatement policy that this board could use to make decisions regarding these kinds of proposals. And I wanted to let you know that I'm working to gather example policies from other jurisdictions in the state, and we'll be bringing that forward at next week's Committee of the Whole. I'll have a draft proposal that you all can consider that will provide some guidelines and some consistency in how we evaluate these kinds of proposals as they come forward. One other thing to note about that, I think Commissioner Mills, you were the one who noted that as we get these kinds of proposals, anything involving giving public incentives to private development projects will involve some level of public input, because it's very important that residents be able to express their views on this kind of thing. And so that's something that we expect to be part of this process as we move forward.
Mr. Yorkie.
Yes.
How appropriate would it be to bring that before the budget committee? Is that that type of policy something we could get their eyes on as well?
We need to, yes. In a word, yes. And we also need to reconvene the Budget Advisory Committee as we are beginning the budget process. So absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Next item, following up on the dog pound issue, which you've heard about at recent meetings. Again, the city of Grand Marais has decommissioned the building down at the municipal campground that used to be the animal shelter. And so the city and the county and local animal rescue, not-for-profit folks are seeking a new location for a new animal shelter. We had been looking at a site in the Cedar Grove Business Park that appeared to be, well, the site that was initially proposed, the EDA board decided was not really appropriate for that use. But there's now renewed discussion about using a different site within the business park to locate an animal shelter. One of the big obstacles to making that happen is there would need to be a stormwater mitigation plan. And just developing a plan and getting it in place can be very expensive, but we do have a local consultant who may be able to do that work at a significantly reduced cost. So we're having further conversations about whether or not that would be feasible to move forward on. So I expect to have more information on that in the coming weeks. The EDA board will be taking up that issue at its meeting this evening. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, you heard last week the governor issued Executive Order 21-21, which sets a schedule for relaxing restrictions in various public venues, also increases the capacity limits for various public places. And so that's something that here in the coming months, we expect to see changes. And then, of course, the goal is to get the statewide vaccination rate up to 70% by July 1st, so that we can further reduce restrictions around public gatherings. The other thing I didn't mention related to the courthouse opening, and this really applies to all activities within the county, is that we do expect local businesses to continue requiring their customers to mask, to sanitize their hands, and to socially distance, and that will be our practice here in the courthouse as well. So all of those steps are still very important. The virus is still out there. Yes, we do have a lot more people vaccinated, which is great, but we do need to remain vigilant to make sure that we don't run into additional problems. So that's where we are with all of that, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Yorkie. Any questions, comments from commissioners? A lot of updates there.
A lot going on.
Yes, never a dull moment. All right. Well, I don't see any hands up, and I don't hear anyone. Just to clarify, Arrowhead Electric was awarded $18.4 million just recently, so that's a good chunk of change. I don't know how our stream of funding would intersect with them.
Mills,
especially given
were they actually awarded that funding, or did they just advance in the process to secure it? Because I think last I heard, they had just advanced in the process to be eligible for that funding.
well, you would probably know better than me.
I'm not sure of that, but perhaps.
I guess one question I did have, and I don't know if you'll know this, is I presume the city would have its own American Rescue Plan funds as well. Do you know anything about that, Mr. Yorkie?
I don't believe it does, no.
Ah, well, that's significant. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll be talking with Mike Roth and, you know, coordinating with them to see how best to use these dollars locally.
Yeah, because I know, well, I guess I don't know. I've gotten the impression that their enterprise funds have suffered. I don't know to what extent. I don't know how severe it is, the situation at all. But yeah, it'll be interesting because of course we want to cover our costs that we've incurred in public health. We also want to be able to invest for, you know, what I think we can all agree is the number one issue in our county, housing, right? And those infrastructure costs. So there's opportunity there. So just finding that balance will be a bit of a dance, but yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty more discussions about this. That was a tangent, I'm afraid, though. So that moves us on down to item 14, employee concerns, commissioner concerns. The first one is commissioner reports, meeting updates. Any reports or meeting updates? Commissioner Sullivan.
Just like to give the group and the public an update on the Passion Pit meeting that was held last evening. We spent a great deal of time regarding public engagement. And in addition to a recent WTIP interview that's been aired repeatedly, we had a letter go out to Old Shore Road residents trying to get information and input about solutions to some of the issues that were brought forward to this board last summer. We also have an article that will be in the Cook County News Herald a week from this weekend. And Nick Kusick is working with our group on a press release that will be given probably by the end of this week, again, soliciting feedback from the general community or the broader community. We do have a property survey that's going to be done both with the MnDOT parcel and with the county parcel. And we talked a little bit for the first time really about public versus private ownership, just to get that discussion going. But I did want to share with you that brief update.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Any questions on that update? Nope. Okay. Any other commissioners have any reports or meeting updates? Just one thing that I want to make the board aware of is that we'll be doing a 6-month, it's past 6 months now, but a 6-month review for Administrator Yorkie. And so working with HR Director Dixon on that, and it will be the full board, and it would be a closed session, and using largely what our county has for employee reviews and director reviews, and then also just some reflection specifically to Administrator Yorkie's position, as it is significant, right? But just want to give a heads up that that's not forgotten and forthcoming sooner rather than later, ideally here. All right, well, that moves on to meetings to note. We have our special meeting posted already for the May 17th. That's the discussion around the Community Center Extension Director position. I think especially there with the extension side of things, considering our guest. And we have the Board of Appeals and Equalization, June 17th at 6 p.m. Community Leadership Committee, otherwise known as the Joint Powers, June 10th at 5:30. And then that moves us down to just correspondence and memos. This is item 15. We have the EDA packet, and we can review that. Item 16 is recognition of staff. So May anniversaries is Sarah Hadley in PHHS for 7 years. Jason Hughes in the Sheriff's Department, 6 years. Leif Lundy, Sheriff Department for 23 years. Kyle Olberg, MIS, 16 years. Troy Olm in Maintenance, 6 years. Paul Spry in the Sheriff's Department, 19 years. Darcy Ziller, Sheriff's Department, 19 years. Thank you all for your work and your service. There's some big numbers there. It's really, really inspiring to see. And then we have May milestone anniversaries as well. Elena Hansel, Soil and Water Conservation District, 10 years. Rusty Johnson in the Highway Department, 25 years. Allison Plummer with Public Health and Human Services, 15 years. Will Sandstrom, Sheriff Department, 20 years. And Greg Thompson at the Highway Department, 35 years. So very significant milestones there. Thank you all for your work and your service to our community. And that brings us to our last item, unless any commissioners have anything else they would like to bring forward. And that last item is adjournment, so I would open it up for a motion.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion. Is there support?
Sullivan supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan.
We're so bashful. Want to just keep going.
Yeah. Well, we got through a lot today. We have a motion and support for the discussion. We got through a lot today, and I'm impressed with how it went. So thank you all for your participation and cooperation and all your good questions and discussion. I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Swallowson.
Aye.
Commissioner Storley.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval to adjourn. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you all very much.